let's talk about Bitcoin. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, like in crypto, I don't know there's 9,000 projects, 5,000, who cares, right? And there's only one that counts. And there's a
Yeah.
way of finding out about that. Okay. So um, I want to talk about all the other things Bitcoin could be. Why Bitcoin is so amazing. Why is
Okay.
Bitcoin amazing? Why does it inspire you when you get it?
Hmm.
Um, I've spoken to people, tried to turn them onto it, kind of thing, and sort of said, what's going to happen is if you take notice of what I'm saying and try and acquire some knowledge yourself by using your common sense on YouTube and just bothering, you will have a moment, and then suddenly, you'll be at the door of the rabbit hole. Um, Now, when I was first turned on to Bitcoin, I was just like, so, oh my God, I got to tell everyone, not everyone I've ever met, but everyone,
Hmm.
which is such a stupid, naive thing to want to do. And like, I haven't changed since I was 7,
Right.
because it's like one of the bands, both the bands I formed, I always assumed, of course, they were on the same page as me, and they got it and they saw it that way. And when certain people ended up being sort of one trick ponies and not doing anything new,
Yeah.
um, I mean, and like Lex was saying the same thing to Jimmy's song, the 80s and the 90s were kind of a replica of the 60s and the 70s. And yeah, there was definitely good music and what have you, but we're not here really talking about music. I'm just saying, actually, I lost my thread, man. This is
Oh.
chemo head.
Um, let me try to pick it up for
Yeah.
you. You were saying, what was it that made you feel that you needed to tell everybody about Bitcoin? And it wasn't, hey, I got a way to get rich quick and I
Yeah,
want
yeah,
you to
yeah,
hear about it,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
This is this is a really phenomenal kind of phenomenon. Um, why people are so turned on because you don't even know yourself the reason that you're so excited about it. You're just so excited about so many different aspects of it, and I think for myself, well, and you were saying how when you've been in a band, you thought everyone was on the same page, and I think you were going to go to. Well, it turns out we weren't all on the same
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
We all had a slightly different view,
Or
which is kind.
actually, no view. Like,
Yeah,
it wasn't like, oh, they didn't like all these other
yeah,
opportunities and potential. They didn't give a fuck. They weren't even aware of it,
right, right,
and that's the shock. Like, I don't get it,
yeah.
because they're the same. I, just assume they're the same as me. I interrupted you, but it was just that was the thing,
Hmm. So
I
it's
couldn't
yes,
believe it when you get that glazed look when you start telling them, oh, tell us about
right,
Bitcoin then, and then you start telling people and like you
yeah.
realize after 90 seconds, I've lost them.
Hmm. Well, for me, I when I first found out about it, I couldn't quite put my finger on what was so exciting about it for myself. I knew I was head over heels falling down the rabbit hole, tumbling deeper and deeper and deeper, and I was fascinated by its unstoppability, and I was fascinated by its encryption, and I was fascinated by its peer-to-peer nature. These were like fascinating things, and I was fascinated by trying to wrap my head around, well, how much might a Bitcoin be worth? Will a Bitcoin be worth more than a house, or will it be worth more than 10 houses? But it wasn't. It was just for the sake of this, the amazingness of this invention. And when I tried to speak to people, I didn't have the words to capture what it was that was flaming my excitement, my curiosity. And even when I decided just this year to be a writer and to write about Bitcoin, I realized that I was excited about so many things, which is why I wrote that. My introduction to Bitcoin was like 25 articles, each covering a different, looking at it from a different facet, right? Like Bitcoin is this multifaceted, it's like a disco ball, and every mirror on it is like a
Yeah, cool.
different,
I like that one.
it's a, it's a different way, and it's a different thing that you're looking into. And so I'm excited about its voluntary nature. I'm excited about how different it is from everything. I'm excited about its unstoppability. I'm excited about its inclusivity. I'm excited about its worldwideness. I'm excited about its defeat of tyrants. I'm excited about, and so when you realize that there is nothing else that you can be as excited about because it's so refreshing and revolutionary
Could
on
it
so
be
many
a,
topics.
could it be a gut revelation that, my God, whatever this thing is, it's so many things, and I know it works. I believe it.
Hmm.
I'm not being conned here. I'm not even
Right.
thinking about money. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
about Bitcoin. Why am I obsessed with it? Why can I
Yeah.
not stop thinking about it? Why
Right.
do I want to find out more and more about it?
Yeah.
And the more that's happened, the less I want to tell people about it.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I certainly don't want to tell people about, hey, this is a get rich quick thing. I will still sometimes tell people it's a great way to save your money, but very quickly,
Not to
if
mention
I
your
even,
ass.
yeah, well, this is it. Very quickly, if I'm even talking about money at all, the topic switches to the importance of freedom and property rights.
There you
And
go. The amount of
yeah,
good, the amount of potential for not being pointed at as an idealist, but to actually have an idea that is good and mutually beneficial, and being able to expedite it, and it not being it not being anything, it not being necessary anymore to be
right.
duplicitous or
Yeah.
coercive. That option has never really been around on the planet since we've been writing about it on stone or
Yeah.
in books.
Yeah.
So that's what overwhelmed me.
Yeah.
The opportunities everywhere to actually have a childlike, naive idea that was just good because we are wired that way, and actually be able to
Yeah.
go ahead with it. And again, in the vehicle, it's so many different vehicles at the same time.
Right. Yeah, no, it's so extraordinary because it's built with such broad scope and such integrity that it's, it's inviolable in its purity of being digital property, scarce digital property to, and
The incorruptible substance of
yeah,
alchemy.
yeah, and its incorruptibility, and so imagine all the things that it will make possible to have an incorruptible substance that can be transmitted, transported anywhere in the world in any proportion to any person, and only on a voluntary basis, never taken or seized by force. This is
Opt
why it's
in.
so extraordinary. Yeah, this is why everyone's struggling to find what it's like, but it's not like any, like it's the first of its kind and it's the only of its kind. It's a one of a kind thing that's never existed before. So we're all struggling so much to understand it and describe it, and we can only describe it using words that describe other things we've seen before, but it's not like anything we've seen before, so we don't have the words to describe it. And we're going through this process not of discovering it, but of learning about, because it's been discovered, but in
The
under.
value proposition isn't ubiquitously a financial thing. The value proposition
Right.
of Bitcoin, they'll be, pondering that in 200 years because it's just going to expand. I think it's our second chance of getting the internet right. Um, I think all the flaws. I mean, all the flaws in Ethereum. Actually, that's a good name for an album. No, all the flaws in Ethereum kind of
Yeah.
digitally echo all the flaws of the World Wide Web.
Yes.
Just cronyism, centralized thinking for you. No choice, pal. If you don't like it, leave. I loved it when you were making
Right.
that point. Oh, well, if you
Yeah.
don't like it,
Yeah.
fuck off.
Yeah. If you don't exactly, and
Yeah.
good, and where are you going to go, right?
Yeah.
And we've sold you on a value proposition that you. And anyhow,
Yeah. 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 I don't know how we did that. Yeah. No,
it's
it's like so. I always feel good when I say Ethereum sucks because it's so important to know that Ethereum sucks for anyone out there that's a newbie now, or those leftover guys from the 2017 that are still going on about frigging altcoins and that don't need blockchains and don't do anything. They've got nothing to do with money and they're nothing new. They're just a digital rendition of an old scam. And so there's thousands of blockchains supporting that idea.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, to cut through all that sort of
right.
noise, and like
Do
when
you know
people are
what?
saying,
Yeah.
what,
I was going to say, what's interesting about it is we've just been talking about how hard it is to describe what Bitcoin is and what makes it so special. And that's why it's so easy for people to make knockoffs that don't have any, like not even one of the special qualities of Bitcoin, and to trick others and often even trick themselves into thinking that they've recreated something similar to Bitcoin, right? Like even if they know that it's a bit of a knockoff, that they're passing it off as similar to Bitcoin, but in reality, it doesn't do anything of what Bitcoin does. Most of all, it doesn't have integrity. It doesn't have decentralization. It doesn't make any promises that it can keep, that anyone can count on it keeping.
And sort of doesn't do anything anyway.
Right. Yeah. So,
Essentially.
like this is what's so incredible, that every imitation from is essentially stillborn from the perspective of the value proposition of all of the things that Bitcoin can do. Like here we are, we've been saying Bitcoin can do a million things. We can't even list them all. And none of its competitors can even do one of the things, like, because when you describe any one of the things, even like the most simple thing, like hold your value. Well, none of the other things can store value. None of the other things are even secure from tampering with the blockchain, because none of them have blockchains that people can run remotely. None of them have people remotely running them. None of them have the quantity of proof of work inside of them. So everything else has a malleable blockchain or an undownloadable blockchain.
So this is obvious that even if you're willing to say, listen, I know you, Granny, so I believe you, man. Just tell me how it works. Even if you've got a willing participant, I think 18 months, you might suddenly get a breakthrough in certain areas, but it's a language. It's
Right.
the missing language. And money was always a language. I believe money was a language before language, so to speak.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's been
Yeah,
around. It's been around. People have had a sense of you owe me, I owe you. There's a notion
yeah.
of fairness since before there was any written language. It was like you killed the buffalo and you gave me a steak. I owe you, and we didn't even
Yeah,
have
I
to
owe you
use
one.
the
I
words.
owe
That's
you
right.
one.
Like,
It's that
yeah,
simple.
I can have that kind of conversation with a cat, right? Like I don't need language for us to know that there's some exchange between us, and we're,
Yeah.
if we hunted something together, we get to share it together. Not, well, I'm going to turn on it and it's going to turn on me. It's
Well, that would be a zero-sum game anyway, wouldn't it?
right.
So most the people that work in banks, most of your friends, this sounds like a really hoity-toity statement, but nobody in the fucking world knows how this works, understand that we're a debt-based economy. I didn't before I got into Bitcoin. So I'm not saying, oh, everyone should know this, but
Right.
this is where the deprogramming is really important. This is where we've got every syndrome possible. We're so indoctrinated. And when you look at the situation, the fear and guilt of religion, okay, and the absolute mystery of money and the amount of emotion leveraged against it, and invariably it's always coercive. It's always like, pay me, when you're gonna pay. People say, time is money, and it's so simple that money is time. People don't understand what is going on. Just because we're in these modern times with high-tech computer communication, we're still playing out the same stories from 10,000 years ago, and we keep going round and round. Do you think Bitcoiners have this kind of inner circle cult religion language? They talk about anti-fragility. They talk about turnings, because we all know about the full turning, and talk about self-sovereignty. Or do you think Bitcoin was the vehicle to focus you in on all this?
Well, I think Bitcoiners definitely have a philosophy. You could call it Bitcoinism, if you need to put a label on it, which is a developing philosophy, because it is this discovery of these facets of our civilization that were somewhat hidden to us before. That again, Bitcoin is kind of this mirror or this prism that revealed, it broke, like when you shine a white light into a prism, it breaks out into all the colors of the rainbow, and you can see it contains all of this. It's like we shone the light of our modern civilization into this prism, and it broke it out and said, take a look at everything that's wrong. You can now see the whole thing was like a messy soup, right? It was just this everything was blended together into like the white light. But now we can see there's all these different things. We see that there's something wrong with the money system. We see there's something wrong with the way we've been educating everybody. We see there's something wrong with our justice system. We see that there's something wrong with our political system. And we can see them all separated out, but we can see how they all come back together to create what Bitcoiners are essentially calling the fiat standard, the fiat
Pretty
world.
much. And it's not just money, is it? It's
Right.
general. The fiat standard is a general philosophy. It's like
Yeah.
it's the bondage that we're
Right.
all in.
Yeah. But here's the most important point I want to make about that philosophy. Because like whenever some new insight is discovered, because it's a part and it's true, it allows you to make advances in so many different areas because you can integrate it into all these different things. So that, you know, I don't want to pick any scientific thing and analyze it too much because I haven't prepared my thinking. But like as soon as we figured out that objects falling vertically accelerate at a certain rate, that enabled all sorts of things in warfare and
Because it was
construction and
so.
other things.
It really was so.
Right.
It was
Right.
indisputable.
Yeah, it was indisputable, and it applied to all things. And you know, and I think that I don't know exactly how to yet articulate the insights that Bitcoiners have, but we're able to start to apply these things across disciplines. Like just for me, the other day, I was talking to another parent of another child who doesn't fit well within the school system. And it occurred to me, is you know, the 20th century was the century of industrialization and mass production. And so we built all these systems that took inputs in of a certain quality, you know, that fit within the factory machinery and then output something else. And I realized, oh, you know what? We tried to apply the same manufacturing methodology to raising human beings. We have this educational system that takes a 6-year-old and puts them into first grade,
batch processing
grade.
people.
And anyone who doesn't fit well within the system is not accepted as being just a different kind of human being who needs to develop differently. They're treated as though they have a disorder. And it's literally called, like, you will be called as having attention deficit disorder. If you can't sit in a classroom long enough, you will be called as having obsessive compulsive disorder. If you're too meticulous about certain details and qualities of certain things, and many different attentions to details will be lumped together as obsessive compulsive disorder. If you learn a little bit more slowly than everybody else, you used to be called retarded, you're now called mentally challenged. If you learn too fast, you're called gifted. And that's frowned upon in many ways, right? It's not just like a pure gift, and it's often not accommodated for and not dealt with. And so what we actually have is we've inverted the whole thing. Instead of saying the education system is here to serve children of all varieties, we've said all children must fit within the education system that we constructed, and we will medicate and punish and distort and contort these children until they do fit in it or break as a consequence. Like, and I don't think that there's anyone who would be listening to this and won't say, oh, you know what? That's true. And many will say, and I hadn't quite realized that before. And I think this is the kind of example of when the light of society gets filtered through Bitcoin, you can start to see these sorts of things. And Bitcoiners are the people who are starting to see these sorts of things, not just applied to education, not just applied to banking, not just applied to politics, not just applied to economics, and so on and so forth. And we're getting all these insights because there's this prism of separation of revelation that this thing is doing. And how the heck it's doing it, we haven't quite figured it out yet. But for me, a big part of it is it's an amalgam of provable truths.
There you go.
And I still don't know exactly why it is that thanks to Bitcoin, my mind is wired in a way to start to see these truths about other things.
For once on the planet, you had something that was a frame of reference, and you learn pretty quickly it does what it says it does on the box. And it's really very useful thing because it's so advanced. I mean, you can audit the global money supply every 10 minutes and be certain of it.
Yeah. You know what I think?
I know you know all this, obviously.
Yeah. But you know what I think maybe something just occurred to me. Bitcoin doesn't ask you to change to use it. Bitcoin accepts everybody in the world exactly the way they are. And that's one thing that's really, really unique about Bitcoin. Almost any other thing, right? Like the education system is the example here. It doesn't accept anyone the way they are. It says you must fit within, like, there's a minimum tolerance and a maximum tolerance. And if you're,
I fancy that Bitcoin doesn't care, much like nature.
mm-hmm,
Okay. But the fact that you can rely on it
mm-hmm,
starts making you see yourself. And then you start thinking, well, if I do this and if I do that, and I'm not talking about money scheming, I'm talking about getting turned on to lower time preference and
mm-hmm,
getting turned on to some recent history
right.
that kind of, well, where was that? Why don't I know
Yeah.
that? And then
Yeah.
starting to add
Yeah.
things up. So Bitcoin doesn't necessarily care. It
Mm-hmm.
makes you care. And
Yeah.
then you have to rethink yourself because you've got
Yeah.
a frame of reference that is the truth. And then the
Yeah.
potential of that frame of reference. This is why we're all crazy about Bitcoin. Let me just ask you something. Are we in a bias reinforced religious bubble?
No. We well, I mean, like, so the notion of bias means, in my view, that it's filled with error. Read all the
Error from
adjectives.
confirmation bias.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, no, no, if anything, we're starting to see a truth that we couldn't see from within the system. Again, when we were all caught up and swirling around in our modern world, I'm making little air quotes for people who are listening, in our modern world, and thought we had all the answers, we actually needed to be able to step outside of it to say, here's everything. Like, we had to know that something was wrong, because despite all the wealth and all the industry and everything else, I don't want to say everyone was unhappy, but we all sensed that there was something wrong. Like, we weren't getting satisfaction from, even if you were successful in this world by its definition, you had lots of money and you had a great job and you had all these toys, you still weren't able to get any real satisfaction. You didn't have validity. You didn't have satisfaction. You didn't have validation. You didn't have self actualization. The fiat system, this modern system, can provide toys, but it can't provide self-actualization, is what many of us realize.
Like
And we're
Max
looking.
Kaiser says, it is a sugar high. It works, but just for a few seconds, and it gives you nothing because it gives you that
Absolutely.
gratification way too
Yeah,
soon. So
yeah,
no plan, no
right.
no work,
I,
proof of
I
work. What a
remember,
concept.
yeah,
Oh, you remember?
I remember the first time I heard this, which is like 25 or 30 years ago. Someone once told me that the happiest moment in the ownership experience of a Mercedes Benz was the realization that you could afford it. So it wasn't even the
Absolutely, I can
buying.
dig that. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't even the buying of the thing. It certainly wasn't the getting delivery of it. It wasn't the driving of it. It wasn't the maintenance of it. It wasn't the selling of it. It was just knowing that you could afford it. And it shows the emptiness of, like, fiat marketed products, that they're just marketed for status symbols, or their appeal as a status, rather than there's something that really delivers value to you in the long term. And this is the thing with brands, that they try to achieve a premium, a brand premium over what the actual good is, right? They make you think, well, this good is worth like $5, but I'm going to pay $50 for it because it's made by Nike and they sponsor athletes, or it's made by Apple and they do this, or it's made by somebody, by somebody with a brand. And we kind of got lost there, because that created a feedback loop of not building quality into products, but spending money on marketing into products, and all of us going along with this thing where we were prepared to pay more for something than it was worth, and therefore creating an incentive for people to inflate the brand
Well,
premium and the brand
you
value
do
of
that
things.
and virtue signal about it. Like just
Hmm.
impressing the neighbors, aren't you? Or you're just impressing your
Sure.
friend. Well, I've got the iPhone
Yeah.
11, and
Yeah.
you've all got iPhone 8s.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, excuse the noise.
Yeah. You got a
Yeah.
bongo drummer there?
No, it's just like when I get I didn't know messages were on the computer, but
Mm.
that's what I get. If
I
I
like
didn't
that
turn it
sound.
off, it would have gone, Keith, you may be interested in this.
Okay.
But you had to miss that bit.
Right.
Um, so the wonders of Bitcoin, my main message today is Bitcoin is about so much more than money. But
Hmm.
the fact is, Bitcoin is the hardest money ever, and it's a unique asset. There's nothing new under the sun except Bitcoin, and it will lead it. leads to potential mutually assured
Preservation.
preservation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the map to the future.
I like it.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, just that it is always inspiring. And like, if you like, there were lots of times since the 2016, 17 bull year when I got into crypto, where after a few months, I felt exhausted, like I'd been on a bender. And I was like, fuck, I haven't been suffering from blockchain euphoria. I just can't believe the quality of information I'm finding here. I can't believe the fulfillment. And this is all aside from the wonder of actually spinning up a wallet and doing
Right.
a transaction and seeing this thing working. It has a great effect on you at the time. And it has this delayed effect. And yeah, once you're in the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I think you're there to stay. But you're allowed to be in a multiverse of rabbit holes, and it gives you access to a multiverse of rabbit holes that are really interesting. And the reason it's so great and interesting is because it's all about, the trendy thing lately calling it error correction. It's all about the truth. It's much closer to the truth, which is and you can feel that. And it
Yeah.
becomes overwhelming sometimes. And
Yeah.
then you're knackered from it. I
Yeah.
mean, life has been magnitudes more intense for me since 2017, notwithstanding some of the stuff I'm going through because of Bitcoin, and it's made, I'm 64, and it's made things that happened to me when I was 14 and 19 make sense, and things I did when I was a kid that I'm, supposed to be successful for made me see what I really did and what it really means. And I don't know. So that's why I say, are we in a confirmation bias kind of religious bubble cult of weirdos? Because since I've been into Bitcoin, it's like, oh, kids are even weirder now. It's like, fucking hell, don't mention the B word around Keith or it's over, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah. What about you?
It's funny you just mentioned you were 64 and the Beatles song started
I
playing in my
know.
head when I'm
I remember hearing
64.
it for the first time and wondering what I'd be like.
Yeah.
Absolutely remember being in, my
Right.
front room, getting ready for school, hearing it
Yeah.
and thinking, I'll never be that old. And if I am, I won't be like what we
Right.
had in the 60s,
Yeah. And it's kind
proper
of
old geezers.
it's a very lovely song. I'm just going through the lyrics
Yeah,
in
it
my head.
is.
Like
It
when I
is.
get
Yeah.
older, losing my hair many years from now, I've already lost most of mine. Will you still
Yeah.
be sending me a Valentine, birthday greetings, bottle of wine? If I'd been out till 2:45, would you lock the door? Will you
Will
still
you
need
still
me?
need me? Will
Will
you
you
still
still
feed
feed
me?
me when I'm 64?
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I don't know whether to tie that into Bitcoin or not. But that song kind of speaks about traditional values, I
It's a low
suppose.
time preference song.
Yeah, it's a really low time preference song because
No,
it's
very
saying
simple
let's.
values that
Yeah.
are actually very, well, we obviously agree with them, you know.
Right.
Um,
And so just that as you bring it up, it's kind of like we got lost as to what the values were. We got distracted, and what we thought was this modern life is everything got picked up, and we all wanted the latest iPhone and the latest computer and the latest
yeah,
fancy car that's electronic. You want to talk about a religious cult? The
yeah.
cult of consumption, which delivered empty calories literally in the food and empty calories metaphorically in its products and its values and its what was deemed to be prestigious. If
I
anything,
believe they
like,
did it on purpose.
okay, well, I mean, we can kind of dig
I
into that,
believe the
whether
unseen hand,
yeah,
the
go
money
ahead.
changers,
Yeah.
did it all on purpose, and we're cannon fodder for sugar
I
now.
think we all
You
got,
know,
so I'm going to give it a little bit more benevolent. I don't want to say that there aren't evil planning forces behind it, but I think a lot of us got caught up in it easily and became a part of it without being any part of any conspiracy. Like many people went and studied marketing, not because they were wringing their hands together saying, "Mwahaha, I get to be part of the evil elite." It was a discipline, and they accepted that it was a discipline, and they learned how to work for ad agencies that made people emotionally desire products that they should really have no emotional connection to whatsoever, because that's
advertising
what
used to be art.
worked.
It used to be so incredible. And now it's all a thing that is, to me, I mean, it's never going to stop, but it's over. I mean, it was so
Right.
exciting
Yeah.
between like the late 40s and the 70s, and then
Right.
it just turned into exactly what you're describing, this kind
Yeah.
of
But
dopamine
this.
programmed.
Yeah. And here's something that I point out. It's as successful as Bitcoin is, it's never paid for an ad. It's
That's
never
fun.
spent.
I was
It's
thinking
never
that the
hired
other
an ad
day.
agency. It's like it's all of the communication around Bitcoin comes from people voluntarily choosing to make a signal and broadcast that signal and repeat somebody else's signal, not in exchange for money, right? Like, let's be clear, what is advertising? Advertising is the communicating of a message intended to get somebody to buy something, and paying someone who has somebody else's ear money to retransmit that signal. And so there's already a selling out inside of it. Like, already, if you are a media, like if we took ads here, right, we would be saying to somebody, for money, we will tell the listeners and the watchers of this podcast whatever it is you want us to. We might turn away some people because we have some integrity, but we'd be saying, whatever words you want me to read, whatever
Well,
words
we
you want me
wouldn't
to say.
actually,
We
if it
would,
was
no, we
me,
would, if we,
no, we wouldn't.
I'm just saying, if we were taking advertising, that's what it means that we would do, and which is partly why. But when you promote Bitcoin, there's nobody paying you to do it. And people will say, well, you've got heavy bags that you're holding and you're trying to sell your bags onto somebody else. But I don't see Bitcoiners trying to sell their bags to somebody. I've had, anytime anyone in the early days when I was getting involved, and I said to somebody, and somebody said, you should listen to you should find out about Bitcoin. I said, oh, that's amazing. Will you sell me some Bitcoin? Everyone was like, no. You find it someplace else. I'm not giving my Bitcoin away. And I said the same thing to many people. They were like, okay, this is really exciting. Can I get a Bitcoin for it? I had a friend once who got, this is like 5 or 6 years ago, his computer got ransomware, and he said, I know you have some Bitcoin. This is back when Bitcoin was like $400. And he said, can I have a Bitcoin from you? And it was only $400. And I said, I'm not going to sell it to you. But I helped him find somebody in the days when it was very, very hard to get some. And I also said to this friend, why don't you get 2 Bitcoins? Give one to the hacker and then buy one for yourself.
That will make it all work out.
Yeah, it's too bad he didn't, right? Because now he would have been thanking the hacker for teaching him a very valuable lesson, a lesson that turned out to have a lot of value. But, so if we weren't doing it for money, what were we doing it for all along? Why were we promoting Bitcoin? What was Bitcoin who was paying us? Or maybe we realize now people do things not just for money. And so we talk about Bitcoin as money, and then we see there's so much more than money that is what's driving this thing. Like, this is so different from owning shares in a company that you want the value of the shares to go up in. That's again a false metaphor. Bitcoin is not a company. Bitcoins are not shares in the company. Bitcoins are part of this philosophy that speaks to people having the right to keep their property, anybody having the right to participate in the system. Like, that's not, now we're talking about ideal money, or like we're starting to tell other people what we think money should be like. But when you say it's a system that everybody can use, well, that's clearly in direct contradiction with what the people who run the fiat system say, right? The defense that any banker would have of the fiat system is, we work very closely with the government to prevent the wrong people from having access to money. Almost all of the regulations are here to prevent money laundering, drug trafficking, all the things that government doesn't want to do. And that's why, unfortunately, 80% of the world doesn't have access to a bank, because they can't prove that they're not criminals. So it's like the money system has a guilty until proven innocent bias that's off the charts.
And worthless paper money that is absolutely
on top of that, right?
Exactly,
But one could say, well, and many do. The gold bugs say, well, where's the value in a Bitcoin? I can't even touch it, so it's no better than paper money, and we're in a debate, and I'm okay to say, you know what, we're in a debate, guys. You think money is one thing, I think money is another thing. The fiat people think money is yet another thing, and we're all agreeing that money is a necessary thing, but we're disagreeing about what the ideal form of it is. And And that's why you and I and the rest of the Bitcoiners are standing on a different footing, looking at the world to say, what do we want our system, our civilization to be like? And we are coming from this perspective that looks at the fiat system and says a lot of stuff about it doesn't work. It is exclusionary. It provides some elites who don't actually do any valuable work with tremendous wealth. And so it discourages the production of wealth from the working people. And it encourages participating in this corrupt class that steals everybody's money
It's a
either through excessive
multi-generational
inflation.
fraud. It's a
Yeah. Yeah.
predatory capitalist crony fraud that has been
Right.
perpetrated
But
because
I will say, like if you are 18 years old and you go to college or university and you start to pick a major, you don't wring your hands and say, "Mwahaha, I'm going to study economics because I know if I can become a chief economist of a bank that I can get money for nothing by lying to the people." Like you go in with a lot more innocence. Or if you go into marketing and you end up and you're a creative person, you don't go in and saying, "Oh, I can't wait to fool people into buying products that they don't really need." Like nobody goes in with this evil intention, but the system distorts your soul by paying you to do these things, and that's the way to make money in these disciplines. But you don't realize it when you go in. Like it's not advertised that advertising is evil. It's not advertised that economics is flawed and wrong. It's not advertised that banking comes down to making debt slaves out of the population. So people who become bankers, they didn't go into it with evil intention. And many people will like go, and I guess they'll probably be, not many people will get to be the CEO of a bank, but many people will go into banking. And even the ones who get up to being CEO of a bank don't necessarily look at the system of what they're doing as evil, and they don't look at their organization as an evil organization. They just, they're working for the shareholders. The shareholders want increased dividends this quarter. The best way to get increased dividends is to lend out more money, because that's what the only source of revenue for the bank are fees and interest. So raise the fees, get more people participating in fees, lend out more money, and the shareholders are happy. And you think that that's your job, and you don't realize how you're corroding the whole civilization by making every single human being unable to afford a house without going into 25, 35, 40 years of debt that they could never pay back, because you're not the one who's even made the decision to do this, right? It's like the whole... Anyhow, I can go on and maybe
yes,
pointers
yeah, I
do.
get it, right? But so, I mean, we can wrap it up about now. So
Yeah.
Bitcoin has this way of making you voluntarily. It's the best self-help you'll ever receive is accepting Bitcoin. Okay, it's voluntary. You can reject it. You can come back. You can go as you please, and you won't get coerced or punished. Yeah. So it's let's leave it on.
Yeah. Okay.
Bitcoin is the gift that keeps on giving, and it seems to be the vehicle towards something that has just not been possible on the planet. Otherwise, they would have sorted it
Yeah.
10,000 years ago.
Right.
These stories keep
Right.
playing out, and it suits certain people.
Yeah. Well, I do believe that we're entering a new age, right? We had the Dark Ages. If we just think about after the fall of Rome, we had the Dark Ages. Then we had the rediscovery of reason, and we went into the Age of Reason, is what it was called, which became the Enlightenment, which became the Renaissance, which then led into the Industrial Era, and now we're kind of in this information era and this fiat period, which is a short period where we've lost the values that the Beatles sang about before the fiat standard kicked in when I'm 64, and we've lost those things, and this age is coming to an end. And I think Bitcoin plays a big part in allowing us, rather than to moving into another dark age, to moving into
All right,
this other
one more
age.
note on the
Yeah.
light then.
Yeah.
There was a time in 2014, even 2017, when it was really complicated to get pure signal, a proper signal about Bitcoin and finding out about it. These days, you just have to go to hope.com, TFTC, what Bitcoin did, us.
It's
There are so
yeah.
many resources out there that will
Yeah.
sort you out quickly.
Yeah.
You're going to get told about safety and aim as Bitcoin standard, Jimmy Song, all these characters, that they're all actually really important, and they've all got great information. Even these FtLoB books, whatever about FtLoB at the moment, um, the information in there is pretty good. It is really good for your mind. Thinking fast and slow, can't remember. I can never remember those guys' name.
Right.
But I'm just saying, the information's there, and it's a quick route to that waiting room outside the rabbit hole door,
Mm-hmm.
and you could be 2 articles away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these characters on the scene now, Travis Kling, Lynn Alden, Michael Saylor,
Yeah.
Robert Breedlove.
Right.
Uh, he was really welcome on the scene and
Yeah.
brought some real feel. Now you with these quick spurts, it's like almost making. I mean, if you put these 20 articles together, it's a wicked book, and it's a
So,
cohesive story.
to anyone listening, you can actually get the articles as a book at swanbitcoin.com/whybitcoin. You can just download it. You have to give an email address. Please give your real one, but you can give a fake one. You just download it straight from there. So those are the 25 articles that I wrote earlier this year. It feels like so long ago. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
and
didn't.
it wasn't broke. It was a
Yeah,
matter of weeks, and you've really
right.
been on a roll. But the thing is like, I'm reading them, and they're like clearing things up for me, and just
Yeah,
I can read certain things. And think, I never have to think about that again. He put it so clearly. I'm sorry, I can't think of an example.
right.
I loved it again. Hey, I'm not shilling Ethereum. I think Ethereum can just fuck off, please. But some of the points you made about Ethereum and how it worked and why it was a
Mm-hmm.
Dino, as Jimmy Song would have it, decentralized in name only, and
Yeah,
Bank of Vitalik, and then all the mirroring blockchains. That's just been the infrastructure for
right.
shitcoin scams. And for somebody coming into a scene, if they have their Bitcoin moment, then they've got to shoot off for like 2 years and find out what money is, and that's going
Yeah,
to blow their mind, and they're going to be doing
right.
history and game theory and yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Like
history and
it's
economics.
really something to watch, and I know the same thing is happening to me. So it's not like I'm observe. It's not like I've been through it and I'm watching it happen to others. But you mentioned Lynn Alden, and I followed Lynn Alden, I guess, since she first started talking about Bitcoin, and she talks about so many other things. But I watch as her conviction deepens, and her tweets get more and more serious about Bitcoin, and less feeling a need to to pay respect to things that aren't worthy of respect. So I don't have a tweet to pull up here, but her conviction is growing clearly, and you see the same thing. Michael Saylor has no lack of conviction because he
No
went all
doubt.
in and borrowed. But when he talks about Bitcoin now, it's not about he's not talking about the price either. He's talking
No,
about
never. Yeah.
freedom, and so like we're this. I think this is really what it comes down to. This Bitcoin is a philosophy right now. It's being discovered. It's like the Renaissance. The Renaissance didn't happen in one day. It was people started to rediscover the both the Age of Reason and the Renaissance. Right, the Renaissance means the rebirth. That's literally what renaissance is French for birth. Right, the rebirth, and so it was the rebirth of civilization and the rebirth of art. And you look at the architecture and the art that came back in the Renaissance, and it became better than ever. Like there's no better sculptures and paintings than came from the Renaissance. So it wasn't just a recreation. And I think this is what we're likely going to see. We can call this the second Renaissance, perhaps, maybe a little premature to go that far, but I think we will see all this knowledge that was actually gained and gathered through the fiat era and all these previous eras be put to good use, and detach itself from these kind of perversions or these broken systems where we think that it's important to make money in the short term through advertising rather than through delivering real sustainable value. Like people will look back at that and say, yeah, there was like a 50-year, 70-year period where things got kind of really overheated and silly, and they made a lot of mistakes because they overly thought of things as industrialized, and scale was the only thing, and everybody ended up with a house that looked exactly the same, and they all bought these cheap things that were meant to go obsolete and weren't meant to last. And just everything that's wrong. And they were worried that they were destroying the environment, but they kept doing the very same things that continued to destroy the environment. So they didn't have any conviction or any way out of this. Like, we're going to break free of that for some time. I think the other thing that I hope is true, and I have every reason to believe it is so far, even though it's all speculative, is that this will be a very long lasting age, because it rests on this thing called Bitcoin, or it can use as a support truss it can use as a foundation this thing called Bitcoin, which is not going to fall apart. Bitcoin is fucking built to last for goddamn ever, right? It is just, it's unbelievable. That's what I was getting at when I wrote this article on why some people think Bitcoin might be alien technology, because it just is built to last for billions of years, and nothing else we build is even built to last for 20 years. So it's just this massively different
So it's so weird
foundation.
because it's software. It's really an emulation. I mean, one of the most inspiring things in Bitcoin actually is proof of work and how that works and
Yeah,
how the difficulty works, right?
yeah.
But that's what made me able to correlate the past and hard money periods and the beautiful buildings,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's 10,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, or 240 years ago. Um, you can always correlate quality proof of work with a hard money system, and
Mm-hmm.
you can always correlate absolute hedonism and just decadence and too much food, too much sugar, all the wrong thing, obesity, all the things that are wrong with the planet now, imbalance, because it's sugar fix land, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really sad. And people, that's why don't want to overdo it with the evil corp thing, but essentially, these corporations don't give a shit about us. All they
Everything
care
goes
about.
wrong inside of them. Yeah, like they're beasts that eat human beings, and use living human beings to make food out of other human beings. Right? Like
Yeah,
and they confuse other people, and they dazzle them, and they trick them, and then they you know they're involved in, I can't say fraud, because obviously that's a legal thing, but they're involved in some game of trickery, and it's not everything. I mean, I don't want to suggest that every single company, every single activity is, is a fraud, but it seeps into so many companies today because they're trying to maximize their profit, because they're trying to use advertising to get people to pay more for their product than they otherwise would. It's not like this honest corner store, even like an honest lemonade stand, which is a kid with lemons and sugar and water and saying, "Hey, I'm making lemonade. Give me some." Like, I'm not trying to tell you some story about it's gonna make you attractive to the other sex, and it's gonna get you
yeah, yeah.
all this status. It's just gonna
Smoke this
give you,
cigarette,
yeah,
and
it's
you're
gonna
just going to have
refresh you.
women lining
Yeah.
up outside the
Yep.
door.
It's going to refresh you and give you a little bit of energy on a hot day. And like, there's an honesty to a lemonade stand that a kid with a lemonade stand is a more honest business than the most
Yeah,
profitable business in the world. Who should, and why, like, what a tragedy that is. You would think that the most profitable business in the world would be a super honest stream of tremendous integrity, delivering nothing but truths and
well, that's what it
amazingness because
used
they
to
have
be in the
access to
ads.
science. Yeah. And we got lost, we got confused because everybody went public and everybody was out. Oh, let me quickly
Because
sell
of
out my
greed.
company. Greed and short time, like that short time preference, right? That high time
I didn't
preference
realize
mindset.
until somebody said it out loud. One of the first incentives Satoshi used to get you into Bitcoin is greed.
Hmm.
And then I was like, dude, yeah, it's so fucking obvious. I'm greedy. We're all greedy. We're
Yeah.
naturally greedy. We naturally want more. But not only that, we're naturally conditioned to be greedy in this really warped way based on flawed information. So Bitcoin flips the script on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bitcoin aligns our self-interest with the interests of others.
yeah.
It makes the game theory win-win for everybody rather than win-lose or
It doesn't pay
lose-lose.
to play it another way. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
and
pay to play it the other way.
that's the game that Satoshi invented. Like, Satoshi invented a game. Like, Gigi says it only takes two people to play the game of Bitcoin, but many more people are playing it. And he invented a game that everybody's a winner. Like, and everybody
Yeah,
and
it's insane.
nobody
Yeah.
try. It's a giant cooperative game. I only played the first, and here's the way we think of things in the Fiat world. Forever, as I grew up, every board game you played had one winner and number of
Winner
players
takes
minus
all.
one losers, and it was only like 3 years ago that I played my first what was called a cooperative board game, where you were all trying together to win the game rather than
What was it?
it was called Spirit Island, and you each are like a different god, and there's this island, and it's being invaded by Westerners, and you're the natives, and you with the gods are trying to save the natives from the settlers. Um, and there's all these different things you can do in different turns, and there's disease and blight and all these terrible things that happen, and the game is either won by all the players together because you manage to save the natives lives, or it's lost because the natives all die, and the island is taken over by the settlers.
But it's a cooperative win and
It's a
lose.
cooperative, and
Yeah.
that's really what Bitcoin is like. You and I are on the same team, and so is everybody else who we've
I'm
mentioned.
sure
All these characters
we're
and all these people we don't
naturally,
even know. Yeah.
I'm sure we're naturally wired this way. You know, you can get
Yeah.
a bit upset and jaded and then angry and then you're hating everything. But really, if you just look to your natural inner witness and look
Mm-hmm.
at people and look at what they want and what you want, we're wired this way. We want to cooperate. We've been
Yeah.
forced to fight each other.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like this unseen hand keeps putting us in this coliseum and just saying, "I know you love him.
Fight.
You, if you
Kill
want
him.
to live,
Yeah.
kill it."
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's being psychologically reinforced all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
we covered this in the first three podcasts, kind of thing. That it's really hard to accept that and look at it and just say, "I've just had everything wrong,"
Mm-hmm.
and then you could say, "Well, it wasn't my fault. I was only," you just have to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you experience something as a kid, when I say as a kid, as a 20 or 30-year-old, there's a kind of part of you that it doesn't occur to you. This has happened before. This is an old story. You just,
Mm-hmm.
like I thought, uh, um, sex and drugs and rock and roll, for want of a much better expression, or
Yeah.
free love, sex without consequence. I thought, oh, that's only happened ever since the 50s, but I was only
Yeah.
about 7 when I was like, or 9 when I was thinking about it and
Yeah.
listening to these new progressive groups and the freedom that seems to be about the innovation. For me, the
Right.
Beatles were the Bitcoin of that time
Yeah.
because they showed you that you can do it, kind of thing, with
Right.
your own ingenuity, and you can copy or you can be,
Yeah.
so I'm going to wrap it up here for me.
Okay. No,
Okay,
this
we've
was
done
great.
about an hour.
Yeah, this was a great podcast.
Listen,
I'm glad we did this, and hopefully we'll have Bitcoin Mechanic on with us next time.